Welcome to Biota.org Interviews. I'm Tom Barbalet, and today a little insight into Argentinian artificial life through Diego Malone and his team, who have developed an artificial life contest on SourceForge. This interview is particularly special because it is an audio correspondence based on questions that I emailed Diego and his team, and their responses recorded in audio. I welcome all correspondence and the opportunity to interview any artificial life developers, whether or not their spoken English is acceptable for the podcast. I think in the case of Diego and his team, they probably would have been perfectly acceptable for the podcast, but they chose, however, to record audio. This is an acceptable method. Text responses to emails, also an acceptable method. I don't mind reading out interviews on the podcast. Basically, my interest is to get as many folk who are developing artificial life all over the globe into this podcast feed. So if you're developing artificial life and you're not necessarily happy with a spoken interview, feel free to contact me via email, tom@noble8.com. I'm more than happy to do an email correspondence interview and to read it out in the feed just to get your research out there, and general discussion too. I'd like to thank Diego and his team in particular for starting this new method of interviews for the Biota.org Interviews feed. As I mentioned initially, this is an audio interview taken with Diego, Maximilian and Daniel from the Artificial Life Contest. Many thanks for the chance to interview your group, Diego.
Thank you for your interest in our project.
Can you please introduce your group and give some discussion to your backgrounds and how you got interested in artificial life?
We don't have a dedicated group in this project. The people related with this contest can be separated in three groups: the organizers of the contest, the developers of the environment, and finally the consultants, who are the developers of the microorganism. Two of the organizers, Daniel Weber and me, came from the first competition 5 years ago, and Georgina Stemeyer joined us last year. We all come from different universities. Daniel is electrical engineer and master in computer science. Georgina is engineer and PhD in information systems, and I am bioengineer and PhD in computer science. The development group was recently formed 1 month ago. Previously, it was like an individual project with some isolated contribution of occasional students interested in the model. The new group of developers is integrated by 3 members: 2 undergraduate students in informatics, Gaston Ramos and Maximiliano Boscovich, and me. Furthermore, we also received some contribution from other students like Pablo Novara and Jerónimo Barraco. The third group is the most variable. Each year new contestants arrive and only a few of them participate more than 2 consecutive years. In the first years they were only undergraduate students from bioengineering, but now we have many students from informatics and information systems too.
Looking at contemporary artificial life conferences, there are many new fields coming from the definitional work of the late 1980s and early 1990s. Through the development of artificial life and the diverging fields that are all based in early artificial life, what has inspired your group in particular? Where do you see your interests in the future?
We can say that the original idea was initiated in the middle of the 90s, when I was lecturing in biological models. I was implementing a simple model of cellular automata for cardiac tissue, and at that time arrived to my faculty the movement about object-oriented programming. So we developed a simple and direct connection between a biological cell and an object. Then we developed a model to reproduce the output of the well-known prey-predator system modeled by the Lockard-Volterra equations. But our approach was to model each organism as an individual object, counting the number of individuals in each species and comparing it with the concentrated variables of the differential equations. That successful experiment was the origin of our actual simulation of artificial life environment. Some years later, we adapted this population model and created two new simulations for teaching topics related with object-oriented programming, artificial intelligence, and biological models. The first model was a very simple simulation of microorganisms with an internal neural network that sensed the neighborhood for nutrients and decided the next direction movement. In this simulation, a sour plant traces of nutrients, and the microorganism evolutionarily learns the weights of the neural networks to follow these traces to survive. After several iterations, all dead microorganisms are replaced by the offspring obtained by crossover and mutation of the alive one. The second model was the artificial life contest, where the students should develop their own strategies of survival, that is, their own ideas about microorganisms. Then, all the created microorganisms must compete for survival in a common environment, with reduced nutrient availability. This idea of convert the model in a contest was a great motivation and a real challenge for the students. Actually, we organize one contest per year. About each 2 weeks, we organize the tournaments where all the participants bring their new release of microorganisms and fight for the survival in our common environment. The colony that dominates the other ones and accumulates the major living energy is the winner of the tournaments and wins 3 points for the global ranking. The second one obtains 2 points and 1 point is for the third one. The source code of the winner in each tournament is published on internet with public access for the other participants. At the end of the championship, the participant with more points is awarded with some gift from the universities, and all the participants explain their strategies to the others in a common presentation.
Your project, the Artificial Life Contest, is relatively new on SourceForge. For people not familiar with the development, can you please introduce it? How long has the project been in development? What brought you to SourceForge as a place to display the project?
The SourceForge project was created last year on October, mainly because it seemed to be changed from being an individual development to a collaborative one, and SourceForge provided tools for version control. However, 1 month ago was formed the developer group and the central repository on SourceForge began to be used. This provides to the project an organized way to make improvement and to maintain the developer communicated through the mailing list or the tracker for the assignation of tasks. This new way of working has produced 3 new releases in 1 month. The project is in a beta stage, although the version is totally functional. To reach the alpha stage, basically, we need to provide a simple method for the installation. The problem is that it always needs a C++ compilation because the central idea of the game is that the user should develop the microorganisms by themselves and need to build all together in the simulation. We provide some very elementary examples of microorganisms, but they are only to show how to interact with the options of the environment. More complex survival strategies must be developed by the contestant if they want to win.
What are the plans for the future of the project? Will you continue to maintain the project through regular updates? Do you have plans to spin off the initial project into other artificial life developments?
Yes, sure. We had many ideas to improve it and to make it simpler to install. We have even thought to develop install packages for new Linux like .deb and .rpm and propose them as packages for future releases of Debian, Fedora, etc. We are also translating parts of the source code and the documentation from Spanish to English to capture the interest of more developers and users from other countries than Argentina. In general, we try to maintain a planning attitude, worrying more for introducing a small improvement in the short time instead of big improvement for the long time, which is the basal model proposed by Eric Raymond. Nowadays, there is also a parallel development of the contest in a new environment in Java, with a broader design to allow simulation of different kinds of competitions of artificial life. However, up to date, it is a personal development, not available on SourceForge yet.
In the Biota.org interview on the VIDA Prize, the topic of artificial life in South America was discussed briefly. can you characterize artificial life development in South America, or is it so diverse to avoid common themes?
Not really. It will be very difficult for us to do this, because there are very few groups in the same area. They are isolated, and it is mainly because we are quite new in this subject and we haven't really had contact with other groups.
Is there a local artificial life community in Argentina? If so, what are the artificial life projects of particular interest other than the artificial life contest?
We don't know a community on artificial life in Argentina. If there is one, I guess it is very small. There are even very few individual developers. With the artificial life competition, we are trying to bring the subject to undergraduate students of computer science and bioengineering in our region, with the idea of forming a local community, which have already happened. Maybe in the future we can grow to a national and international level. We have hopes about that.
What is your sense of the broader artificial life community?
Our vision of artificial life is more scientific than artistic, closer to biological models and computer science. We haven't really spent much time for our models to have a spec very close to biological life. Instead, we care more about them having a natural behavior when talking about microorganisms populations. But also, we have created a game that motivates students to get closer to these subjects.
What more would you like to see from the artificial life community?
I would like to see a reinforcement of the convergence between artistic and scientific perspective, because in spite of their different internal codes, they are both creative activities by nature with a widely area to develop algorithms, innovative strategy in an open mind team.
Any final thoughts?
Yes, I want to say that this project has been developed thanks to Diego Milone because he's created initially and put his code under GPL. This allows us to load it into Softforce and to add new functionality and improvement. We believe we are in a good way and the team feels optimistic looking for the new version of the artificial life model in all aspects.
Many thanks once again for the chance to interview you all.
Thank you very much, Tom.
Thank you for listening to this new method of interviews on the Biota.org interviews feed. If you have any correspondence, any interest to be interviewed, any points of discussion, tom@nobleape.com. As you may have noticed, the Biota.org interviews podcast has split into 3 separate sections which are all put in the feed. The first is the Biota.org interview format, which is me interviewing one or more artificial life developers or theorists. There's the Biota.org Conversations, where I get a small group together to have a chat about a specific topic on artificial life. And then finally, as you've seen in recent podcasts, there is the Biota.org Chat, which is me talking with another artificial life developer or artificial life theorist about a wide variety of topics in the field of artificial life. All these formats are open for anyone listening to this podcast to contribute, so I do implore people who want to get in contact and be a part of these podcasts to contact me, tom@nobleape.com. I always welcome any email correspondence, even if it's just to say hello and that you're liking the podcast, so please feel free to get in contact. Thank you very much for listening to this Biota.org interviews podcast. Look forward to you tuning into the next podcast.